Have you ever found yourself hesitating when someone invites you over? Or maybe you've noticed you don't really feel like having people come to your home the way you used to? If so, you're not alone. This isn't about being antisocial or losing interest in life. It's about something deeper, something that quietly shifts as we grow older. When we were younger, opening our doors to friends felt easy, even exciting. We'd invite people over for dinner, share long conversations on the porch, maybe pop open a bottle of wine or put on some music. There was something special about that closeness, about feeling connected. But somewhere along the way, for many of us, that desire fades. These days, we think twice before saying yes to a visit or extending an invitation ourselves. And that's okay. In fact, it's more common than you might think. Let's talk about why this happens. Not from a place of judgment, but from a place of understanding. Because once we understand ourselves better, we can feel more at peace with the choices we make. When I was talking with a man named Mr. Allen recently, he's in his early 70s, he told me how different his life looks now compared to when he was younger. Back then, he loved having people over. He enjoyed cooking, hosting, chatting with old buddies around the table. But now, he prefers quiet. He enjoys his morning tea, tending to his little garden, and walking in the park by himself. He still keeps in touch with friends, but they usually meet somewhere outside, never at his home. His cousin Emily was surprised when she noticed the change. "You used to be the warmest, most outgoing person in the family," she said. "Now you seem distant." Alan just smiled and said, "I'm not distant. I've just learned what kind of peace I need." That stuck with me. Because the truth is, life has a way of teaching us what matters. And with time, we start valuing calm more than chaos, sincerity over small talk. One of the biggest reasons older folks start stepping back from home visits is simple. We've learned that not everyone who shows up at our doorstep comes with sincerity. When we were younger, we assumed everyone who smiled at us had good intentions. We'd invite them in, pour them a drink, and welcome them like family. But over time, life reveals some hard truths. We learn that some people visit not to connect, but to compare, to gossip, to pass time, or even just out of obligation. And when we feel that kind of energy in our home, when a guest brings tension instead of peace, it weighs on us. Think about it. Our homes are our sanctuaries. After a certain age, peace of mind becomes more important than popularity. When you've worked all your life to create a safe, quiet, comforting space, the last thing you want is to invite in unnecessary stress. Then there's the practical side of it. Hosting isn't as easy as it used to be. We used to cook big meals, clean up in a flash, and stay up late laughing. But now, just preparing for company can leave us tired for days. Making the house spotless, worrying about whether the food is good enough, wondering if the guests are comfortable, it takes effort. And sometimes it just doesn't feel worth it. Mark, a man in his 60s, shared a story that made me chuckle and then sigh. He ran into an old high school friend, Tom, who happened to live in the same neighborhood. Tom said, "Hey, we should catch up. Come by this weekend, let's have a drink." So Mark did. He showed up with a couple of dishes, had a good time, and thought it was the beginning of a new tradition. The following weekends he kept visiting, bringing food, sharing stories, enjoying the company. But one day, Tom pulled him aside and said, "Listen, Mark, my wife and kids, they're not too happy with these visits. They feel like it's disrupting our routine. Maybe we should slow it down." Mark was crushed. He realized that the invitation had been polite, not heartfelt, that he had mistaken courtesy for closeness. That's a bitter lesson, but a common one. Sometimes we take people's words at face value, not realizing that behind closed doors, their feelings may be very different. And that brings me to something important. In our later years, we don't want to be a burden. That's one of the quiet fears many older people carry. We don't want to show up unannounced, overstay our welcome, or cause friction in someone else's home. Even when someone says, "Come by any time," we wonder, Do they really mean it? Or are they just being polite? It's not that we've become paranoid, it's that we've become perceptive. Age sharpens our emotional instincts. We start picking up on those little shifts in tone, that hesitation in someone's eyes, the discomfort they try to hide behind a smile. And once we sense that we're not truly wanted, even once, it sticks with us. So, little by little, we start choosing solitude over socializing. Not because we hate people, but because we've come to value our energy. We want real connection, not empty rituals. And if that means fewer visits and more quiet evenings with a book or a cup of tea, so be it. Now let me tell you about someone else, Mrs. Nancy. After retirement, she was the kind of neighbor everyone liked. Cheerful, generous, always down to chat or invite you in for a slice of pie. On rainy days, she and a few other women in the neighborhood would rotate homes, chatting, drinking tea, sometimes gossiping a little too much. One afternoon at a gathering, someone brought up in-laws, and Nancy casually mentioned that her daughter-in-law didn't seem to help much around the house. It wasn't meant harshly, just one of those things people say in passing. But word got out. Her daughter-in-law heard the comment, and from that day on, the relationship turned cold. Her son even scolded her for talking behind people's backs. Nancy was heartbroken. She didn't mean any harm. But after that, she stopped joining the home visits. "I'd rather dance with them in the park and go home," she told me. "No more talking about family. No more visits. It's just safer that way." That kind of experience changes people. It reminds us that even among friends, words can be twisted. One innocent comment can lead to months, sometimes years, of tension. And that's where I'll pause for a moment. Because whether you've been in Nancy's shoes, or Mark's, or Alan's, or maybe you just feel that inner tug pulling you toward stillness instead of noise, you're not alone. The world may not talk about it much, but this shift in how we socialize is real. And it's valid. You see, something starts to shift inside us. Not all at once, but slowly, quietly, when we reach a certain stage of life. It's like our inner world begins to speak louder than the outer one. We stop needing noise to feel alive. We stop needing crowds to feel connected. We begin to crave something else entirely: peace, stillness, and a life that doesn't feel like performance. One of the most honest truths about getting older is that our energy becomes more precious. When we were younger, we could hop from house to house, attend dinners, throw parties, and still have energy to spare. But now, just the thought of it can feel exhausting. There's preparation, conversation, cleanup, and sometimes the emotional effort of being on. That can wear a person out. And the truth is, many of us just don't have that kind of emotional fuel to spend anymore. That's why Mrs. Nancy chose to stay home. That's why Mr. Allen prefers a walk in the garden over an evening of entertaining. It's not about bitterness, it's about balance. It's about learning that your energy is a resource to be spent wisely. But let's talk about another reason older people tend to avoid visits. One that's not about physical tiredness or emotional caution. It's about unspoken comparison. And it's more common than many would care to admit. Even when we live in the same neighborhood, the same building, or even the same block, no two families live the same way. Some have done well financially. Others are getting by. And when you visit someone's home, it's hard not to notice the differences. The bigger TV, the newer kitchen, the extra bedroom, the high-end appliances. Even if nobody says a word about it, you notice, and so do they. It's not jealousy, not really. It's just human nature. We compare. And sometimes those comparisons settle in quietly, in the back of our minds, like little reminders that maybe our life didn't turn out as comfortable as we hoped. That maybe our retirement isn't as smooth as someone else's. That maybe, just maybe, we're falling short. One woman I know, Carol, said something that really struck me. She said, "Every time I visit my cousin's house, I feel like I'm walking into a magazine. It's so beautiful, so spotless. And it makes me come home and look at my old carpet and my chipped mugs and feel embarrassed. She never says anything, but I see it in her face. She notices too. Carol's cousin probably didn't mean any harm, but that doesn't mean the feelings aren't real. And when feelings like that come up too often, the natural reaction is to pull away. To say, "Thanks, but I'm staying home today." Not because we're angry, but because we're protecting ourselves from the quiet sting of inadequacy. And let's be honest, at this stage in life, we've already overcome so much. We've worked, raised families, paid off debts, faced health scares, lost loved ones. The last thing we need is to feel like we're in a silent competition, especially in our own circle. So instead of visiting, many of us just stop. We send a message instead. Or maybe we meet for lunch somewhere neutral, somewhere where no one feels like the guest or the host. A small cafe, a park bench, a walk through the mall. No pressure, no judgments, just time together, shared in a way that feels even. That kind of simplicity becomes golden as we get older. It's not that we don't care about others anymore. It's that we've learned to care about ourselves too. We know what protects our peace. And when you've worked this hard to earn your peace, you don't give it away lightly. Still, this shift can make us feel a little lonely sometimes. We might miss the big family dinners, the clatter of dishes and laughter echoing through the house. We might miss the days when we didn't think twice before popping into someone's home. But when we step back and look at the bigger picture, we realize that the way we connect has simply changed. It hasn't disappeared. There's also something else, something quieter and more delicate, that plays a part in all of this. It's the awareness that time is moving, that people are moving, that as we age, the faces we used to see every weekend are no longer there. Some have moved away. Some have gotten sick. Some have passed on. And as our circle shrinks, the effort to keep it going starts to feel heavier. The grief sits just under the surface. That's why solitude isn't always a choice made out of preference. It's sometimes a choice made out of self-preservation, a way to cope with the changes that life has brought. But in that solitude, there's also a beautiful kind of strength. The strength to say no without guilt. The strength to prioritize rest over rituals. The strength to accept the season of life you're in and still find beauty in it. So if you found yourself stepping back, withdrawing from the social routines you once enjoyed, don't think of it as a loss. Think of it as an evolution. You're not becoming less, you're becoming more selective, more honest, more intentional. Because at the end of the day, it's not about how many people visit your home. It's about how peaceful you feel when you're there. And if the answer is very, then you're doing just fine. There's one more reason that often gets overlooked, even though it's one of the most common. And that's the sheer reality of what it takes to host someone at this stage in life. We don't talk about it much, maybe because we don't want to sound ungrateful or old-fashioned. But if we're being honest, having guests over just doesn't feel the same anymore. And for many of us, it's not just tiring, it's stressful. We used to take pride in preparing our homes, setting the table just right, baking that special dessert everyone loved. But these days, even standing in the kitchen too long can leave us sore. Cleaning the house top to bottom before someone comes over, that can take up an entire day, and then some. And if guests stay too long, it's not uncommon to feel completely drained, physically and emotionally, by the time they leave. Mrs. Carroll, a retired teacher in her 70s, once said to me, "It's not that I don't like people. I do. But after they leave, I feel like I need a nap and a neck massage." She wasn't joking. It's not that she doesn't care about her friends. It's just that her body doesn't bounce back the way it used to. And the truth is, most guests don't realize how much effort goes on behind the scenes of a simple get-together. And then there's the family dynamic. If you're living with a spouse or with your children and grandchildren, hosting guests can mean rearranging everyone's routine. Maybe your partner enjoys peace and quiet. Maybe your grandkids are studying or napping. Maybe your adult children don't want visitors dropping in unexpectedly. These are real concerns. And even if you love having company, not everyone under your roof may feel the same. That's why so many older folks now prefer to meet outside, at a cafe, a quiet restaurant, or just on a park bench with a thermos of coffee and a smile. There's no pressure to tidy up, no dishes to wash, no one walking through your personal space or overstaying their welcome. It's lighter, freer, more respectful of everyone's boundaries. And you know what? That's not a loss, it's an evolution. Our generation grew up believing that hospitality was sacred, that your door should always be open, the kettle always hot, the living room always ready for guests. But times have changed, and we've changed too. We've come to understand that protecting our energy, our rhythm, and our peace is not selfish, it's wise. Some people may not understand that. They may say, "You've changed." And the truth is, we have, but not in a bad way. We've just grown into a season of life where calm matters more than noise, where honesty matters more than obligation, where time spent alone doesn't feel lonely, it feels restorative. The beautiful part is that we don't need to explain ourselves. We don't need to apologize for not entertaining the way we used to. We don't have to feel guilty for preferring solitude or small, meaningful interactions over loud gatherings and constant hosting. Our lives are ours to shape, and this season, this quiet, reflective, deeply personal season, is just as valid and beautiful as the ones that came before it. And even though we may not visit or invite as often, it doesn't mean our hearts are closed. In fact, in many ways, they're more open than ever. Open to meaning, to truth, to connection that's real and gentle and respectful of who we are now. So if you find yourself staying home more, choosing stillness, guarding your space, give yourself permission to embrace that. You're not missing out. You're creating something. You're choosing what feels right for you. And that is the greatest freedom of all. You've spent decades giving your time, your care, your energy. Now, it's okay to give yourself what you need most: space to breathe, time to reflect, and peace without interruption. And while we may step back from some relationships, the ones that remain, the family, the true friends, the kind souls who understand without asking, those become even more precious. Because they don't need your hospitality to know your heart. They just need your presence, your warmth, your quiet smile. So here's to this season of life, where solitude isn't a sign of sadness, but a quiet kind of joy. Where boundaries aren't walls, but doorways to peace. And where choosing not to visit or host is simply another way of honoring yourself. If this message resonates with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Maybe you've had similar experiences. Maybe you've made similar choices. This is a space where your voice matters, where your story belongs. If you found comfort in this video, consider giving it a like, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We share stories, reflections, and insights for people just like you, who know that life after 60 isn't the end of the road. It's the beginning of something quieter, wiser, and deeply fulfilling. You are not alone. You are growing, evolving, and doing exactly what you need to do to protect your joy. Here's to living your best life, your way, at any age.